All right, welcome back to another episode of Small Business Chronicles. I am your co host, Brian Stone, and I'm super excited because this show is all about stories in business. And we explore all different kinds of industries. Um, and truthfully, we're kind of the Swiss Army knife in the business podcast world because we have talked about networking, we've talked about franchising, we've talked about fractional positions like fractional CFOs, fractional HR. I mean, you name it, we have hit just about every topic that you could possibly imagine on this platform. And we have something yet again that's very new and different. So I am today chatting with Miss Lindsay Didonna, and she is among multiple other hats and businesses that she's a part of. She is also working in the fundraising space. Specifically, she's the vice president of franchise development for Fundraising University. So Fundraising University is really unique because it helps organizations, individuals, high school sports teams raise money and do it in a quick and efficient way. So if you've ever been in any of those kinds of programs, you know that as a coach or as a parent of a student, there's always a need to raise funds. So I know we're going to have a great conversation talking about her story and what she does. So we'll jump right into it. Lindsay, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
I am fantastic. Look, I'm a parent of a 15-year-old, and he doesn't do sports, but I grew up being at every single football and basketball game, not as a player, but as a member of the band, because I'm a huge band nerd.
Yeah.
So your story and the franchise fascinates me. And so tell me a little bit about why you got into this space, and because you didn't initially start there, right? You're in business with family, which is a topic in and of itself, but you also have seen this business grow from a small business into an actual franchise system. So what started everything?
Yeah. So my brother-in-law is actually the founder of Fundraising University. He's been married to my sister for a little over 20 years now. And he was growing up an athlete in a single parent home, kind of a troubled youth, if you will, out in Omaha, Nebraska. And he was a baseball player and a wrestler. And he says that, if it weren't for the coaches that were involved in his life when he were, a lot younger, he probably would have gotten into a lot more trouble than what he did. He says that he feels like the coaches that were a part of his life and his athletic career are really, some individuals that shaped who he is today. And so he went on and continued his career, if you will, in baseball. He played at the college level, as well as some pro time. And then he, at this point in time, in addition to being the founder of Fundraising University, he also coaches with Ohio State baseball. And so essentially the way that Fundraising University was incepted is he was, back in 2009, he was a sales rep, a commissioned sales rep for another fundraising company that did similar to what we do today. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table. My sister was about 8.5 months pregnant with my twin nieces. And he comes down and says, well, the company's going out of business. They're filing for bankruptcy, and all the commissions that I'm owed, we're not going to see any of that money. And so
Oh my gosh.
so my sister, having a complicated and pretty critical pregnancy, she's going, what are you talking about? I don't understand. There's no money. Like, I'm not working. What are we going to do? And I'm at this point very young, sitting there listening to all of this. And he goes, well, I'm going to figure it out. So he goes upstairs for about 3.5 hours, comes back down and says, you know what, I'm going to start my own fundraising company. And so that's what he did. That's how Fundraising University was incepted. So he essentially started between Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and pulled in all of the coaches that he had worked with and started doing fundraisers on his own. And then there are a couple of gentlemen that started with him very early on that were also what we would consider reps, if you will, that worked for him in this small business that are still with us today, are some of the top performing franchisees that we have in the company. And they still live out in Iowa and Nebraska. And so all of our families have kind of grown up together. And we were operating essentially as a small business. My husband and I started Many years ago in the state of Colorado, that's where we're located, doing the same thing. My husband was very forward facing with coaches. I had another career at the time in higher education. And so I've always kind of in the background assisted in some form or fashion. And about 4 years ago, my brother-in-law reached out and said, hey, we're growing rapidly. Back in about, I think it was 2016, 2017, he was approached as, hey, this is something you should consider franchising. You're the best of the best. The amount of money that you've raised for schools, we really think we could help you. And so he said, yeah. So he went through the process. And in 2021, we started franchising. And so he reached out and said, hey, I need your help. I need you to come on full time. And my husband in that time frame had started another small business that took off and went crazy, a drywall and paint business. And so for me, coming in and kind of helping on the corporate or the franchise side, if you will, that was great. That was necessary. But then I also took over our territory here in Colorado. And so I am also a franchisee. I go out and I do the fundraising and run fundraisers with sports teams and activities, programs, things of that nature. So it's been very, very crazy of a ride, very busy, but it's been phenomenal. And we, have continuously increased year over year in terms of performance. And as you can imagine, each year we add franchisees in other areas of the states. And so we're doing quite well.
That is incredible. And there's so much to dive into there, Lindsay. So
Yes.
I'm going to try and make sure that yeah, well, I mean, truthfully, just the beginning of that story is so critical, right? Because oftentimes opportunities, you seek out, right? Most people think about starting a business, they're like, oh, it's this well thought out plan, and then here it is. But then what I find is equally true is sometimes opportunities are kind of forced upon you, right? Because your back is against the wall and you have to make a decision. And so what a phenomenal beginning to what has been such a fantastic story. Um, and so yes, you came on 3 years ago, but from your story, I mean, it's clear that you've been able to watch this go from seed all the way
Right,
to full grown tree, right?
right, right.
So,
Absolutely.
talk about the transition. I'm really curious about how that happened because not everybody that goes into business plans on franchising, but oftentimes they find, and we found from conversations on the podcast that it's a natural progression in business that when they've locked in their systems, that other people want to join in and recreate what they already have. So, what really prompted that decision?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of a couple of different things. I think for one, running it as a corporate entity, and growing rapidly, there was interest from coaches that we worked with that had recommendations of other coaches in other states and other areas. And hey, could you help this team in Ohio? Could you help this team in Florida? And we didn't necessarily have anybody there that could help. And so it was like, well, we need to increase our manpower. But as you think about it as a corporate entity or a commissioned type of sales job, I mean, you're then hiring reps that you are managing from a distance. And, we're a service-based business. We are in schools every single day. We're not calling people or emailing people. We're physically walking into schools. And so you really have to create a structure where you can manage that. And you have to bring on a group of people, that are experts in managing that. And so that's where it just made sense, where we had so much interest in other people through connections and referrals and just, hey, I ran a fundraiser with you, but I live in Oregon, and I would love to do what you all do. It grew into that. And we had, as you said, the systems and the processes and the foundational elements incredibly present in what we did. And they were just so crucial in our process. Like it was just a natural no-brainer. And it was a way for him to be able to scale and do it in an appropriate way. And I think, for him to be able to manage and kind of front the funding for, if you can imagine, almost 40 franchisees at this point, that would be difficult for him to do on a consistent basis forever. So why not open up an opportunity where individuals could come in that are interested in being business owners for the first time or are interested in an investment opportunity where they can make an impact on their community? Why not do it that way? Because we just have such a system and a process built in that it makes sense. We could scale it better than continuing to keep it corporate.
Well, and not only are you sharing your resources, your systems, your processes, but you're also sharing the wealth that's come from
Yes,
building up that business to other individuals that are like-minded, and you're not spreading your time so thin, right? Because most people get
absolutely.
into business to have, to fund their perfect life, right? And that usually means that you can't be in, 40 locations across however many states, right? And still have some balance.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me about, what was the struggle that you guys found in actually scaling that? I mean, there had to have been hiccups along the road that you guys ran into and had to work through.
I think the biggest struggle is, I think it's easy to find like-minded people that want to go out and they want to help athletics or activities groups raise money, right? But I think that when you look from the outside in, you think, oh, well, they're just raising money. That's pretty easy. I mean, they go in for a week and they do a couple things and they make all this money and then they leave and it's easy. But I don't think that people realize it's something we've really had to push into their minds what our schedules look like. Not only as a business owner, right, but a a consistent representation of the business for those in our community. I mean, we work on a school schedule. And so we're in schools from the moment that school opens, before school opens until after school closes at night. And we're running fundraisers in the evenings. We might be doing things on the weekends. We are business owners to the sense where we are fully responsible for the financial side of things and the administrative side of things. And so it's not an 8 to 5. And I think that people in some cases do feel like, oh, I am a business owner. It's turnkey. It's a franchise. I can just buy it and it's going to start making money. And there's not a lot I have to do. And I could hire somebody to do it for me. I think, yeah, there's an opportunity to do that down the line, but you really need to come in as an owner operator and you need to be a part of the business and you need to learn it. That is our biggest challenge, is finding people that understand that and want to commit to that. Because I think that business ownership has just become this like popular concept where people think it's easy. They think or I got laid off and so I'm just going to go start my own business. Well, that's fantastic, but even though you're walking into a franchise in a system that's proven to be effective, like, you still have to put in all the work. And that's probably, I would say, anybody that you talk to that owns a business, in terms of finding really great talent, that's probably a big area of challenge for them. But it is for us, because you have to think there's a lot of individuals that are stakeholders. Like, we have kids that are involved in this, right? We have coaches that are involved in this, entire athletic departments, activities departments, schools, principals, athletic directors, booster clubs. When you go out in your community, for example, over the holidays with my kids and my family in the mall, I had a little girl walk up to me, and I had run a fundraiser with her and they were selling popcorn, and I'm not even dressed in fundraising university gear. And she comes running up to me down the hall. Oh my gosh, Miss Lindsay, I've sold, this many bags of popcorn. And you almost become just so well known in your community and kids remember you. And so there's a really large responsibility that comes with that. And so you can't just turn it off, right? And so it's hard to find people that are interested and willing to commit to that type of structure, and that schedule commitment, if you will. It's just
Sure.
hard. So, but when you find the right people, it's great. But
Well, and I imagine that a big shift occurred, right? Because naturally, when you first start exploring the franchise space, and this happens with other franchises from the conversations we've had, you already have these raving fans that are asking you to pull your system into their market, so that cultural fit is already there. But as soon as you flip that switch and you start actively trying to seek new partners, right, new opportunities and new territories, you
Mhm.
have to be responsible for making sure that you're really communicating what that looks like, right? What the scheduling looks like, what the commitment looks like, what the culture and the
Mhm.
feel looks
Mhm.
like. I mean, we call them reps. You get field reps in multiple industries, but that means that you have to be as you said, a representative of that company or of that brand or of that service.
Yeah, you're always live, right? When you're a business owner, there's no office hours, there's no turn off, there's no shutting things down. You're always live, and we are in a very delicate type of industry, right? We're dealing with youth and working with youth, and so you're always on, and so you have to be completely committed to always being on, no matter, just like a teacher, right? Whether you see teachers at the pool in the summertime and they're like, oh my gosh, there's kids in my class that are here, right? And so you're just always on. It's almost like being a political figure or somebody that's really, really involved in the community. So that's a large commitment that somebody needs to make on top of managing the business, right? Managing financially and
Yeah,
all of that kind of stuff. So
absolutely. Well, it's clear that you wouldn't have that kind of growth unless you found passionate people that were like-minded, right?
absolutely.
So, what would you say was the biggest, operational lesson that you learned in terms of your systems and your structures? You're right, because that's a huge part, not even a huge part. That is what shifting into a franchise model looks like, right? That because your systems are what you're selling, right? So, what was your biggest operational challenge?
Yeah, so we always contracted with outside vendors, whether it was CRM management, managing our customer base, whether it was managing invoices after the sale of a fundraiser, managing the money, pushing things to QuickBooks, making sure that we were successfully able to become our own credit card processors to accept debit and credit cards, which back in the day you couldn't do, and now we can do it, and kids don't even have to carry cash and check. It's crazy. That
Mm.
in itself, operationally, what we were tired of doing was working with outside vendors that had a specific skeletal um, structure that
Right.
just didn't fit what we did, right? And so we were always trying to compensate for something. And we said, you know what, we're done with this. We're going to hire a group of developers to come in and build our systems exactly the way that we want them to be. And we're going to make whatever in terms of amount of years of commitment that we need to this. And so what we do is every year our franchisees pay what we call a technology fee, and we all share in the cost of that. And we have literally built what we call an ERP that houses everything from compliance and HR to financials to CRM to learning management systems. We've built everything from scratch exactly the way that we want it to be. And so now, coming in as a franchisee, for one, you don't have to worry about working with outside vendors. Are they going to be around in another year or two? What happens if they disappear? Or what happens if their servers go down? We're going to lose all our information. Or what if we're in the middle of a fundraiser and it stops working because something happens? We don't have to worry about that anymore. And I would say the biggest area of opportunity was identifying, how do we want this to look? What developers are we going to bring in that we can trust, that can actually build this with us and for us? And we found that they're actually in Nebraska, amazingly, it's crazy enough, right down the street from our vice president of sales. And they've been phenomenal. So for the last year and a half, we've literally built everything from scratch. And what a value add now when we're talking to potential franchisees. I mean, you
Oh
have an
man.
entire technological system that is built 100% accustomed to you and your business, all the way down from finding coaches in your territory to go work with and present to and run fundraisers with, to the very last piece of accumulating an invoice and sending it off and pushing it to QuickBooks in your accountant to maintain your financial picture in your EBITDA and everything that you need. It's just been phenomenal, but what a value add that we've seen come from that.
I mean, that's massive, Lindsay. That is, unless you have been in a really rapidly growing business yourself, you don't really understand this. But um, my my biggest stressor for any of the businesses that I've been a part of has always been the tech stack. Right? Has been okay. What's our tech stack? What's the right? And it's always that you're trying to take some template for some system and make it manipulate it to make it fit. The
Yep.
amount of time, I mean, hours and hours wasted in
Sure.
multiple companies. And I come from the real estate industry, and one of the biggest value adds that I saw is back. Oh gosh, it was about 4 years ago. We changed over to an internal proprietary system that was everything: CRM, lead management, compliance, closing, payments, all of that, and it was
Mhm.
huge weight, right? So yeah, and it's a franchise model too, so similar. I mean, so that is huge though, um, and it's a huge commitment. I don't think people understand how much of a commitment it takes to find a
Mhm.
developer, to have all of that back and forth, all while
I
you're still trying to run your business.
absolutely. Yeah. the amount of testing that goes into it, right? Because you're live with real customers,
Yeah.
and you're trying to develop something from scratch, and you just don't even know necessarily that it's going to work, or there's bugs that happen. And so you're telling your customers, hey, we really love your business, but we're testing this new system, and so we need you to come along with us for the ride. Are you okay to do that? And I think our coaches and customers have been amazing. But yeah, there's not a lot of room for failure, but you know that you're going to fail in a lot of areas. And so it's just how quick can you get back up and make it live again? And how quickly can you, and also the developers, like relying on them to say, okay, well, that didn't work the way we wanted it to. Here's a different idea. Let's pivot here. And, none of us necessarily have technology backgrounds, right? And so I certainly don't, 4 degrees, and none of them are in technology. So I had no idea, what would be another suggestion or what have you. So it's been a big challenge, but I would say it's been the most rewarding thing that we've done, because now, you can accurately project and track, and things are so much logistically simpler for our franchisees. You're not tracking things on paper anymore. You don't have contractual agreements on paper. Everything is electronic. We work with a lot of local vendors and national vendors for discount products that we sell for our, large baseball and football teams. And so now things that we used to have to go out and be on foot and do, we can do it all through technology now, which saves us a lot of time, which we would consider that a non-green activity, because we're not in a school. All this time that we were spending on just managing a system that wasn't great, we could have been in another school presenting to another coach or raising money for another program. So now this new technology, this ERP, has allowed us to do that. So it's been huge.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. And profitability wise, I'm sure that while it was, I'm sure massively it was very costly on the front end, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that your profitability in long term is going to be through the roof. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, the value add for people plugging into that system is massive. In the real estate space, I know people that have integrated and created that whole system that's plug and play, and people are willing to pay half of their revenue just to have a system that they know works, that they don't have to mess with.
Absolutely. Well, imagine too, our discount products that we would sell with our baseball and football teams and large lacrosse teams, those all used to be printed. And so you would have to have a graphic designer, and then you would have to have a printing company. Well, now we've taken them completely digital. So if you want to print them, great. But imagine what that does for a franchisee's EBITDA. Your cost of good has just gone down to nothing, basically. You've already paid for the technology, so you're just going into a system now, and it's just time. You're just building that ticket or that card digitally, and it's a link that kids are now selling on their cell phones. They don't have to physically carry cards. You're not losing cards. You're not carrying cash and check. They're out there selling with the debit or credit card, and it's a safe and secure system, and individuals are getting receipts, and they're able to track it for, tax purposes. I mean, just the amount of benefit that comes from that alone is ridiculous. And the amount of time that save.
I was going to say data protection too. I mean, I was in a conversation in the real estate space with several other vendors and leaders, and the comment was made that every vendor relationship that's outside of your ecosystem is putting your database at risk, right? Because your database is your business. And so if you're letting their private information be housed somewhere else, if you're letting that, they may not have the same data standards that you do, right?
Absolutely.
And now your reputation is at risk, and you're paying for it, right?
Yeah, we have competitors that literally are not allowed in school districts any longer because they were retaining the information when they were receiving support from donors for athletes. They were retaining that information, and they were selling it to third parties. And in addition to that, they would say, for example, accept a donation on behalf of the athlete. And then for 5-6 months down the line, they're still spamming them, asking them to buy other things, buy apparel, do this, that, or the other. Well, imagine, we run fundraisers in 7 to 10 days with groups, and then they have their money. Well, in that particular scenario with a competitor, they're running for 1 to 3 months, and then the teams are still not receiving money for maybe another 1 to 2 months. So they're halfway done, if not already done with their season. And in addition to that, the information wasn't necessarily secure and their information was being sold. And so some of our competitors that had come in after us that wanted to mimic what we were doing, but try to do it in a different way, that information was no longer safe. And so districts have said, you're not coming into our school district anymore. And so for
Yeah.
us on the, we are completely safe, right? And we are our own technology and we're certified to be in schools, and we're not going to be reaching out after the fact and withholding your money and trying to reach out to supporters and ask them to buy socks 5 months down the line to see if a tiny percentage of that could go to the athlete. So it's it's a very good point that you make. And that's really what allows us to also stand above any potential competition that we have, because they just don't have the force that we bring.
Or the trust, right? I mean, because I think people, if you're associated with schools, there's an expectation of high
Yes.
trust, high security, high data protection, right? So I love that you
Mhm.
guys have built an ecosystem to fulfill that. That's incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. Well, what about personally? Because I know we're getting close to the end of time. We could talk all day about this kind of stuff and really enjoying the conversation. But what would you say would be your personal piece of advice that you could share with our listeners, and how you stay focused with so many different things going on? You have you have a spouse that has their own business. You have your own your own business, as well as the role that you have here. I mean, how do you keep everything straight?
Yeah. We focus a lot on mental performance training and coaching. We actually have a coach that we work with that does mental performance coaching through the Atlanta Braves. And so we're blessed to have that resource. But one of the things that he has taught us is the 168. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's 168 hours in a week. And how do
Oh,
you
yes.
down your time, right? And so, as you mentioned, yes, I own another business outside of this. I am a franchise owner. I do all franchise development for the organization. I have 3 kids that are active in sports. I've got a spouse and, you know, 2 dinosaurs that are Italian mastiffs that are 150 pounds each that take a lot of attention, 2 dogs, and and so there's always something going on, always something that could be done. Like I said, the phone never turns off, the computer never turns off. You're always on, you're always live. So we focus on the 168, which is essentially just breaking down the hours of the week and assigning buckets to all of your priorities, right? And so you have to create a schedule and you have to stick to it. And I would say if you're somebody that is struggling with time management, a really great exercise is to partake in the 168. There's something called an A tracker app that you can use that will help you identify where you are spending your time. And then you can essentially break it out into buckets from there, and it helps you reprioritize and make sure that you are sticking to a schedule. We do a lot of automation, delegation, or omission exercises. So, what am I doing in a day, and what could I automate? What could I delegate? What could I completely get rid of out of my life to give me some time back? And so, as someone who is incredibly busy, and I feel like you're always going from one thing to the next, the ability for me to stay on track and to feel like I've accomplished something effectively and just not being a jack of all trades and master of none is using the 168 exercise, using that automate, delegate, omit exercise, using the A Tracker app. Those things have been incredibly helpful. And just the discipline of sticking to the schedule, right? You have to execute your schedule, and so the behavior behind that is really what you have to hone into and what you have to pay attention to. And I find that's incredibly helpful. Otherwise, you can just feel like you're hit by a bus at the end of every day, with the amount of
Yeah.
things that you have going on. So it gets to be pretty difficult when you've got a lot of balls that you're juggling.
Really, really love that advice. So good. Yeah, the 168. You're right. I mean, everybody has the same 168 hours, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and I love that talked about the tracker app, because finances, everybody understands with financials. Yeah. Oh yeah. You need to hold your money accountable. You're looking at a percentage of profit, a percentage of budget for, lead generation, for technology, for whatever. But for whatever reason, we don't view time the same way. And you should, right? You should be tracking what percentage of your time is being spent in one venture or another, and what your time is worth, and what the return on that investment of time is actually getting you, and where you should be spending your time, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's huge. It's huge. Well, thank you so much for that piece of advice. I mean, that alone makes the conversation worth it. And we've had a ton of value just in 29 minutes or so. So
Great.
if anyone in our audience was inspired just about your story and what you guys do, and they want to connect, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, they can always reach out via email. My email address is ldidonna. So that's DIDONNA at fundraising, the letter u.net. So ldidonna at fundraisingu.net. Or you could always, give me a call or shoot me a text message. I'm traditionally very responsive to both. So 720-256-1625. And you can always visit us on the Fundraising U website as well. And that's just fundraisingu.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And guys, if you're driving, don't be unsafe. We'll have that stuff in the show notes for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You'll know how to reach out to Lindsay. So, thank you again. Really, really, really appreciate the time, Lindsay. And look, if you guys enjoyed the show, make sure you do all the podcast stuff. Follow us, like us, all that stuff. And we are part of the Small Business Delivered podcast network, so you can find lots of great business related shows of all different varieties and topics. So make sure you check us out if you're interested in more business content. And until next time, make sure you guys are continuing to keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive. I know that you are. And remember, no matter how small your business is, you have a big story to tell. So let's hang in there, keep at it, keep hustling, and tune in next time for another great story in business.